Tips for teaching young boys to use their words, advice from an expert. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Mothers of Boys Survival Guide. I'm your host, Susie Shaw, boy mom, author, and firm believer that parenting is equal parts comedy, chaos, and hugs. Today, we're talking about something every parent of boys has struggled with at some point, and that is communication. Why do our sons sometimes shut down, shrug off emotions, or seem to speak in grunts, especially when they're teens? And more importantly, how can we help them find the words for what they're feeling? My good friend and co host Cheryl Bond joins me today for this podcast. Welcome.
Hi, Sus. Our guest today is Dr. Gloria Vanderhorst, a psychologist whose career spans nearly 5 decades, working with kids, teens, and families. Gloria began her career and her work with preschoolers, mostly boys, after noticing how often young boys were misunderstood in the classroom. Over the years, she's helped thousands of families bridge gaps through her training in emotion-focused therapy and internal family systems.
Since communicating with little boys is so different than communicating with teens, or as I call them, man cubs, because they are man's eyes staring you in the eye, we're splitting this topic into 2 episodes. Today, we'll focus on our younger boys, and next time we'll dive into effective communication with teens. Welcome, Dr. Vanderhorst, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. I am delighted to be here, and to focus on this particular topic is so important.
Dr. Vanderhorst, would you like us to refer to you as Dr. Vanderhorst or Gloria?
You can call me Gloria. That's
Okay.
very familiar.
Well, I understand that you're a licensed psychologist, author, mom, and grandmother. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and your commitment to mental health.
Well, I came into psychology from a very unusual direction. I was a Midwestern tomboy, and I wanted to do everything my brother did, but I also wanted to grow up to be a math teacher.
Wow.
That was my goal. I was on track until my junior year, when I ran into a teacher in Calculus 2, and I have to take off to go home for Christmas break. And I send a friend to check her door to see the grade that I received at the end of the semester. The friend comes running across the parking lot, yelling at the bus as it's leaving the bus station, screaming, "You got a D, you got a D." And I went, yes, right? I never have to take Calculus 2 again.
I feel you.
And in my head, and then in actuality, I immediately flipped my major and my minor. And my minor was psychology. But I have never looked back. So that's a situation, right, where life has just used a circumstance to point me in the right direction. And I have loved it ever since.
The pivot, right? Isn't that what we all do
Absolute.
these days, especially after COVID?
Right.
And I think parenting is very much about pivoting. And, when I was a young mom, I was really struggling to find better ways to talk with my 2 boys, and they were about 2 years apart. And I watched a documentary called Raising Cain, exploring the inner lives of America boys.
Right.
And it had a huge impact on me.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first scenes in that documentary is an experiment they do with infant boys and girls when the mother, interacts with them and then she ignores them, and the babies are about 5 months old, and the uh the the reaction of the boys to the mom not giving them attention was very significant. It would make them agitated and upset, which was very different than the majority of the girls. And
Mm-hmm.
it struck me at that time that my boys, when I was trying to talk with them and multitasking, which is something, I did
You right.
as a
You
mom,
normally do as a mom.
right? They would literally grab my face
Mm-hmm.
and try to talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to learn how to sit down, listen to them, repeat what they said so they know that I heard them. And then typically I could say no or say whatever my answer was. But, what is your take on, that memory of mine and that experience of mine?
That memory is right on target with the research about the emotional characteristics of boys and girls. Boys come into the world with a broader range of emotional expression than girls have. Now, I'm going to say that again. They come into the world with a broader range of emotional expression than girls have. By and large, our infants interact with females from birth to young school age.
Mm-hmm.
Mothers, nannies, most of our caretakers are females. That's changing now. There are more and more men staying home raising boys, and I will tell you that will make a significant impact on the emotional development of those boys.
Mm.
But without knowing it, all right, mother reacts to the higher range of emotional expression and the lower range that boys are capable of with responses that are teaching them to abandon those ranges.
Hmm.
So you were, without actually realizing it, we are narrowing their capability in infancy. And basically, we're sending two messages, all right? One message is don't go that high, don't go that low. But the other message, because we're sending that first one, is that your feeling states make me uncomfortable. All right.
Mm.
So that broadens it to absolutely any and every feeling
Mm.
that your boy is going to have. So that gets planted in your sons in infancy. Your feeling states as a boy make me uncomfortable. So think of the impact of that as your
Mm.
boy grows up. All
Right.
right. That's the rule that's in his head at infancy. It's mind blowing.
Can you give us a specific example of that in a
Absolutely.
behavior? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's, I can give you multiple ones. I'll give you one I've observed personally in the experience of mother infant dynamics, right?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes in doing therapy, uh, a mother will have an infant, not be able to have anybody take care of the infant. She's going to bring the infant into therapy. That gives me the opportunity to observe this interaction. And so, in a situation like that, where mother brings her infant boy into therapy, I get to watch how she interacts with that boy and how he responds to the interactions.
Mm-hmm.
So when the boy starts to fuss, as it would be normal, right? It's hard to sit in a single place. And she doesn't do anything but hold him. She's not going to do much else in a therapy session. But when he gets uncomfortable or wants more of her attention because she's talking to me rather
Mm-hmm.
than paying attention to him, he gets intense. Mother gets really uncomfortable with that intensity, right? Her
Mm-hmm.
facial expression changes to, ooh, I don't like that. I don't know what to do with it, right? You're out of control, and I don't know how to get you back into control. And so you can see that dynamic. Watch mothers and toddlers interact. In a park situation, the boy gets either frustrated or hurt or gets into a struggle with another child, comes to mom crying, fussing. Mom asks, "What happened?" If he gets a good enough response, she'll provide comfort. Little
Mhm.
girl, same age, same situation, frustrated, gets into a struggle in the park, is crying, comes up to mother. The little girl gets picked up and then asked, "What happened?"
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Go to any mall, go to any park, watch this interaction. It
Yeah.
is common.
Mm-hmm.
We treat boys and girls differently from day one.
Mhm.
So
Mm-hmm.
we have to expect that the boy is going to pick up on that social difference. It is going to be internalized because we've sent a message.
Mhm.
We are not interested in your emotional life.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then we put them into school situations, family situations, where we actually tell them we're not interested in their feelings. Stop crying.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be a sissy. All right. Think
Right.
of all the language that gets used against little boys.
Mm-hmm.
We train them to
Mhm.
abandon their emotional lives.
And I would say that that was the big impact that changed me after watching that documentary was all
Mm-hmm.
that messaging.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Well, as if we're assuming that the boys don't need as much empathy as the girls do because they're just tougher emotionally or something. We're
Right.
making this assumption that they don't need the same amount of emotional
Now,
support.
I do want to acknowledge that this has social value to it. It has
Mm-hmm.
always had social value to it. So if I'm a cave woman, I want my caveman being brave, courageous, all right? I don't want him sniffling. I don't want him crying. I don't want him shy. I want him to pick up that spear, go out there, kill something, bring it back for us to eat. And that historically is the way that we have used men culturally. They
Mm-hmm.
go fight for us, they protect us, they feed us, right?
Mm-hmm.
They keep us alive. The question that I would have is this process still adaptive for our culture? If you look at moving forward, how the culture is evolving, the equality in work relationship between men and women and their capability, if you look at artificial intelligence and how that's going to change the dynamic, we should be very active in giving men more access to the full range of their feelings. And that starts with little boys.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have four children, three girls and one boy.
Mm-hmm.
And can you talk to us a little bit about how boys and girls communicate differently with their communication skills?
So, one of the things that we know about boys is that for some reason, developmentally, they are behind girls.
mhm.
So girls are ready to go to school, sit in an organized classroom, follow directions. Boys are not at that same age, all right? They need to be climbing trees, running outside, playing with trucks, building things, discovering things. They need to be bumping into each other. And so we put them in preschools, right? With with other boys and other girls, and they do that anyway,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
They
I
bump
love
in,
that you just said that, bumping into each other. I think that's
yeah,
really
they
funny.
bump into
Because,
their
yeah,
neighbors and,
I know they
you know,
touch. They
pull on
act.
them. And
they need contact with something, or if it's not bumping
yes,
into something, somebody, it's
that's
hitting a
right.
wall or hitting
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
something
So
high up
girls
or
use
jumping.
language
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and boys use their bodies. Girls
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
discover the world with language.
Mm-hmm.
Boys discover the world with their bodies. And so we could change the structure of how we school boys and girls by really respecting that we need to have a path for boys where they can bump into each other and they can climb trees. Most classrooms don't accommodate that
Mm-hmm.
reality, right? That the boy needs to bump, needs to touch, isn't gonna sit in the circle and listen to the story. He needs to be able to move, walk around. If he could
Mm-hmm.
walk around and listen to the story, that would be great. But
Right.
the teacher wants him to sit, all right? And unfortunately, the majority of those teachers are females
Mm-hmm.
and don't quite understand what's happening with this boy. I mean, the reason I started seeing preschool boys was that the teachers are female, the boys want to move around, and the teacher thinks that indicates there's something wrong with the boy. Maybe he has attention deficit, so let's go have him be tested. So that's how my practice started with all of these preschool boys, is that the structure of the classroom does not accommodate the need of the boy.
When my boys were, I would get that feedback because I had two boys. And I would always ask the teacher, how do you know it's ADHD and not BOY?
Right.
And they would look
That's
at me
great.
like, what do you mean BOY? And I'm like, they're boys. I mean, it looks like BOY to me because I
I
grew up with
love
a
it.
brother.
I absolutely love it. Yes, and there we need to make that shift,
Hmm.
right? So we've already limited the emotional range of expression, and now we want to limit the body's
Hmm.
range of expression, and we're just undermining the society as a whole when we do that.
Right.
What do you think would be some steps in making some progress there in the classroom?
I think there are really good pieces of research and information out there to change the structure of the educational system so
Mm-hmm.
that it does meet the needs of boys and meet the needs of girls. I don't mean complete separate, all right? I think these children should have opportunity to interact with each other, learn from each other, but I
Hmm.
think there should also be clear separation and lots more opportunities for large muscle activities for boys while they are learning things. It's
Hmm.
hard for a preschool boy to sit in one place and have his brain actually focus and pay attention. We miss the reality of preschool boys. If they can move around, they're still paying attention,
Hmm.
Yeah.
right? And things go into their brains more easily if they can move rather than having them sit still. So it's powerful for it's we hold things in terms of sight, sound, and action. Those are the three ways that we represent the world. Boys represent the world more often in terms of action. So
Hmm.
give them that opportunity in a preschool, and they will be learning at a much faster pace than requiring them to challenge themselves to sit in a circle and listen or respond. It's just too hard. It's too confining. We should change preschools so that we're not doing that to little boys.
We did change schools on occasion, a couple times when the boys were little because things weren't working.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and I found when the boys were frustrated, um, that they would react physically.
Right.
They would stomp their foot, they would hit, they would hit each other.
Yep. They'd use
Um,
their bodies.
right? And it was a struggle to help them find their words. And there were times when, every mom's had a child meltdown,
Right.
typically in the grocery store because they want something that they can't have. And I wrote about that, in my book that I call the boys earnest and exuberance.
Right. I know.
And, you know, Exuberance was the younger boy. He was having a full meltdown, laying on the floor, banging his fists on the ground. And I had a philosophy where I tried not to pour a gas onto a fire. So I
Right.
didn't want to add more energy to
Right.
already an energetic situation like that. So I literally like stood over top of him and said, "Is this working for you? Are
Right.
you going to get what you want because you're
Mm-hmm.
laying on the ground behaving like this?" And then I just waited. And
Right.
he lay there for a moment and then he started saying, "It's not
It's not
working."
working.
And I'm like, "Well, then maybe you should get up and try something else because
Right. Let's
this
try
form
something
of
else.
communication is not working for me." So, what suggestions do you have for moms in those, little boy meltdown, situations of frustration and they're tired and everything else?
I love the way that you did it. If I could modify it in any one way, I would have you sit on the ground,
Hmm,
right?
right.
So being at this on the same plane, on the same physical level as that child is really important. So, if he's sitting in his bed, sit on the bed. If he's sitting on the ground, sit on the ground. All right. If he's up here on the higher bunk, lift yourself up, get your butt up there.
Oh, yeah.
The closer that you can be to their physical experience, the easier it is for them to relax, to feel a sense of safety, and to identify with you. You become much more important. Think again, boys are physical, right? They're
Hmm.
functioning in a very physical world. So the more you can join that physicality, the safer they are. And we interact with others from a position of safety. That is so powerful for all of us, but it's critical for little children. It's very, very important for younger boys because, as I've just, pointed out, that we don't create safety for them. So they're a little on edge kind of all the time anyway. So we have to raise our consciousness about the power and the importance of safety for our little boys.
That's great advice. Wonderful advice. I'd like to touch on something you mentioned previously, which was, that I grew up. I have four older brothers, and we're all much older, and so the generation that I grew up in was very much, you know, my father would probably say to my boys, toughen up or stop
Right. Yeah.
crying or,
Boys don't cry.
shut
Right.
shut them down. Boys don't
Right.
cry.
Pull up your pants. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, there weren't any. You weren't really supposed to show emotion.
Right.
And my father lived until he was 91 and still felt that way. Into
Mm-hmm.
his old age.
Mm-hmm.
If my brother went to touch his hand, he'd push him away.
Right.
Like, don't. He couldn't. It was too emotional for him. So what do you think are the long-term effects of that approach for our boys?
Well, you just described it. All right.
Yeah.
And we know factually that men have more physical problems than women as they age. more heart disease, more diabetes, more overweight. Okay, these are all a function of not being able to identify the feeling that they're having, to be able to find a way to express that feeling. And if you will allow me, our jails are full of men, not women. Our jails are full of men because they cannot talk about their feelings or issues. They use their bodies to express something that they're feeling internally. And, if you're going to use your body to hit somebody, shoot somebody, push somebody, you're eventually going to end up in jail.
As a mom, I always felt this was my opportunity to put good men into the world.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons that I wanted to do this podcast was to have the ability to talk to people like you and give more tools to moms to put better men into the world. And I'd like to just touch briefly on, and you've brought this up, but the lack of females in the elementary school
Right.
system and what that really means. I mean, I remember there was a teacher that was trying to punish one of the boys for not getting all their morning work done by keeping them in for free play, right?
Right.
I mean, let's just turn a bad situation worse.
Right.
And he came home and he's like, yeah, I'm not going to school anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done.
Right.
And and so I had to go in and advocate and arrange another option for the teacher. But the and that was Ernest, who really was not my aggressively active
Mm-hmm.
child. Exuberance was ready to bounce off the walls at all given points. And by third grade, he and his teacher were not having a very good experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that they had a couple of male teachers in fourth grade. And so I went in and sat with the counselor and said, you have just got to give him a male teacher. He has
Right.
not had any teacher that truly understands him, and he
Mm-hmm.
needs somebody that gets him.
Mm-hmm.
And that turned him around in fourth
Absolutely.
grade. And, the teacher would let them all wear their favorite team sweatshirts on game
Right.
days and football. I mean, it was really simple things, but it was a huge difference. What advice can you give to moms, in those
I
roles?
love the fact that you advocated for your son to be placed with a male teacher. It's really important that at that level of preschool, first grade, elementary school, that we work harder to
Mm-hmm.
get more men interested in that profession, and that we understand how important it is for boys to have male role models
Mm-hmm.
that are interested in something other than sports. They get plenty of male role models that are interested in sports and crashing into each other, but they don't get enough that are really interested in academics and exploring
Mm-hmm.
intellectual interests. So I would love to see preschools modified and elementary schools modified so that there are more opportunities for boys to have male models.
As my boys got older in elementary school, heading towards middle school, um, the windows when they were willing to actually talk
Mm-hmm.
were smaller,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to learn how to talk with them on their time and not
Mm-hmm.
my schedule.
Right.
um and so for Ernest, I found that he would open up right before he would go to bed. I mean,
Yeah, so
Exuberance
perfect.
would just burn himself out and crash and
Mm-hmm.
go to sleep, but Ernest as he relaxed, he would be willing to talk. And so my husband and I would take turns going in and talking with him at night and just lay in bed and talk with him about his day, and he was willing to postpone going to bed and talking
Right.
with us. It was kind of a win-win. Another uh, place that worked well was in a car, especially
Absolutely.
if you were in the car with him by yourself,
Mm-hmm.
either both boys or but
Mm-hmm.
what tips do you have for parents to strengthen those opportunities to communicate?
Well, you've just identified the two locations that are the very best for developing conversation with boys. The reason they're the best is that both of those tend to put you in the position that you're not facing each other.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely in the car, you're not facing each other. So the boy is much more comfortable in sharing because he's not reading body language. All right. Typically in bed, you're either lying next to each other or you're sitting in a chair and they're on the bed. So you're, again, not facing each other. And so, kind of all of this information, we know that, what is it, 90% of communication is nonverbal. It takes place in the way that our face expresses, our body moves. I'm a hand mover with communication. And if the child does not have that distraction, they are much more able to focus internally and describe what their internal experience is and what they're thinking and what they're hoping and what they're dreaming about. I say, make a regular habit of doing either the bedtime or the car. Make an excuse to put your child in the car because that's healthy conversation that takes place in that time. So structure it, be aware of it. If you have a project that you're working on where you can be helpful, supportive, and you're not facing each other, that's another great opportunity for conversation. I will tell you, boys that I have worked with talk about helping their dads do some project around the house
Mm-hmm.
and just knowing that that is a time that dad will listen to
Mm-hmm.
them, that they can talk, that they can share, right? But they're not facing each other. There's
Right.
Mm-hmm.
just way too much. And if you think about it, so I've robbed the boy of being able to express emotion, but I have not robbed him of being able to read emotion. And in fact, because I've robbed him of being able to express emotion, I have probably increased his sensitivity to processing emotion. So he's reading all of the nonverbal signs for me, just as he did as an infant. And he's deciding whether to take the risk of communicating based on those nonverbal signs. And that's why, when you said earlier, if you're washing dishes, all right, and your boy is trying to talk to you, that's why he comes over and grabs your face,
Right.
right, and says, hey, look at me. Another thing that I encourage families to do is to have a list of feelings and put that on the kitchen table because your brain can recognize what you feel even when you can't produce it. So if you scan through a list of feeling words, uh, the list will just have a word pop out. You'll be able to identify it immediately. And that's a great tool for families is to have a feelings list on the table.
That's a great idea. I know having 4 kids, it was hectic and busy and
Mm-hmm.
working. And I would try to, and so I had one son, and actually he was a very good communicator at a very young age and
Good.
talked a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
So,
he had
but
3 sisters, right?
he had
So
3 sisters, yeah. So, but I would try to, and I was really glad I did this. I would try to take like one day with just each child and a
Beautiful.
really long day into the
Mm-hmm.
evening. And sometimes I would even try to do an overnight somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
just so that this was time to completely, my mindset was, I'm going to talk about whatever they want to talk about. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
not stop them from talking. I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
limit how much they talk, because that's another thing. You can
Right.
easily get impatient with a child that keeps going on and on and on, but they have all this energy and have so much to say.
Mm-hmm.
So that worked for me, and I felt like it was a really good time to really connect and communicate with each of my kids when I would just take them one on one for an extended period of time. Wasn't
That's
very often
brilliant.
because it's hard to do,
It's hard to do,
but
but that's brilliant. Even as you
yeah.
said, if it's just an extended time in an evening,
Hmm.
right? So maybe you don't have, a 12-hour opportunity, but if you moved it from 20 minutes to 40 minutes,
Right.
that's huge.
Hmm.
All right, particularly for a boy who is not used to having his feelings be important to someone else. We've trained you. Your feelings are not important. I'm not interested in them.
Hmm.
You box them up and don't bring them out.
What kind of resources would you recommend right now that are out there that would accept we've that extend this topic?
Oh, that this is a really good time
Yeah.
because if you look at books about fathers, sons, boys, you will find that there are lots of them out there
Hmm.
now, right? Just go on the internet, go to Amazon, plug in, books about boys. 20 years ago, there would have been zero.
Hmm.
Right? Now there are probably a couple dozen that pop up. Good, helpful books, many of them written by fathers who have this same concern, right? Why doesn't anybody know about raising boys and helping boys to
Hmm.
be more socialized, actually, more emotionally available? The other thing I would say is that we also need to train women because even though women say, gosh, I really long for my husband, right, to be more emotional or more expressive, the truth of the matter is when he comes home from work and you can tell he's unhappy, you may ask what happened. He will give you a little bite, right?
mhm.
Well, I was up for a promotion and I got passed over. Do you know what she will say? I'm so sorry. I know you'll get it the next time.
Mhm.
Not
Hmm.
sit down, tell me more, right? I want to hear the whole story. I want to know how this is impacting you. She doesn't go fishing for deeper emotional connection. And that's limiting to the relationship. So we also have to train our women to be able to take a deeper dive with their husbands and not do the, gosh, I'm so sorry, right? And
Right.
Joe didn't deserve it. You should have had it.
Hmm.
Yeah, and well, and
We're
model,
we're
right? Because
responding probably differently than we would if we were with our girlfriends,
Right?
and
Oh,
that happened to our
absolutely.
girlfriend.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be a 3-hour lunch just
It
about
would
that one
be,
time.
right. It would be an extended lunch.
Yeah. Maybe
my
a
hair
weekend.
my
Maybe a
haircut
whole
would be
girls'
canceled
weekend.
so that I could pay
Yeah.
attention to you.
Yeah.
all
But
right,
with
you're
our
gonna make us
husbands, we have to get back to the kitchen and finish dinner,
Yeah.
you're
or
gonna
back
make
to the
us
computer to finish writing.
you're gonna make us better spouses and better moms. So
That's
thank
right.
you. So, Gloria, at the end of all of our podcasts, we ask our guests to share a quote or a mantra or sort of a guiding thought that a mom can say to herself, while she's dealing with the topic, which is today, communicating with a younger boy and her son. So what would you have to say to that?
I think I would put out three possibilities. First, just recognize that your boys are different, and that's a good thing. Second, know that the society has shut down their range of feelings, and that is so hard for a boy. And third, really spend time with your boy in ways that give him the opportunity to engage in conversation. Your little girl, right? She's going to start yammering right away. Your little boy, you're going to have to take a breath. Be a little more patient, be willing to invest the time, and you will be rewarded with a much stronger relationship.
Well,
Wow.
we've heard some great advice from you today, and I feel like we just tipped on the whole conversation. I do feel like we could talk for hours and hours about this topic.
I could go on for hours.
I know.
Sorry.
I think what you've said to us today has helped us all become better moms to our boys, just with what, the small amount that we've talked about today. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Stay tuned to our listeners for the next podcast where we'll continue this conversation. So thank you again for coming out today, Gloria.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you all for joining us today. Follow The Mob on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and your favorite podcast platform. Be kind to yourselves, moms, and have a great week.